This Paris smells of iron and old wood. Your job is to scrub what's left behind, the blood and the brains, day after day, head after head. It's 1794, and Robespierre's terror has hit full stride. Heads are rolling faster than carts can carry them. You don't remember the faces anymore, but you know the wood. You can tell where someone hesitated, where they kicked, where they knelt with pride. The stains speak, if you know how to listen. This isn't a documentary. Tonight, you are the cleaner. You will learn the tricks, how warm water lifts fresh blood, and why brains clot fast if you don't move quickly. If you enjoy these immersive journeys into forgotten corners of history, subscribe and join us. Now, let's begin. And tonight, we walk through a very different Paris, where the blade is sharp, the wood is soaked, and you, my friend, are the man who scrubs what's left behind. Let's begin with your hands. Cracked, stained. Fingernails dark with something that isn't quite dirt. You've just finished your morning shift at the Guillotine, and already you know the afternoon will bring more heads than the morning. It's 1794, and Robespierre's terror has hit full stride. Heads are rolling faster than carts can carry them, and yours is not to question why. Your job is simpler, messier. The scaffold, stained black and sticky from yesterday's work, greets you like an old, grotesque friend. You keep a bucket beside you. Inside, vinegar, water, rags stiff as bark. And the long-handled brush, your closest companion, drubs with a sound like wheezing breath when wet wood meets the iron bristles. You don't wear gloves anymore. You tried once. They tore by the third stroke. Blood doesn't care what you're wearing. It will find its way into the folds of your skin. You sleep in a room not far from the Place de la Révolution, though calling it sleep is generous. It's more of a collapse, an arrangement of limbs in the corner of a narrow space that smells of boiled onions and bleach. The mattress is hay, your pillow is a folded coat, and outside your window there's always the same sound. A wheel squeaking under weight, the murmurs of a crowd gathering again. The guillotine is tireless, and so you are expected to be. They call you nettoyeur with a hint of mockery, as if your work is somehow less than the executioner's. But everyone watches you. When you climb the steps with your bucket, people stare harder than they do for the blade. You are the last touch before the next head drops. You're the reminder that this isn't a ceremony. It's slaughter, and someone must clean the stage. You've learned tricks. Warm water lifts fresh blood, cold makes it stubborn. Brains clot fast if you don't move quickly. There's a blackened section near the back leg of the scaffold. You've stopped trying to lift the stain. It's older than you. Perhaps it came from that noblewoman who screamed just once before the blade, or the printer who sang a lullaby before it fell. You don't remember faces anymore. You can't. Your mind protects itself with fog, a curtain pulled over the day's procession. But you remember their shoes. Strange, isn't it? The muddy boots of a cobbler, the silk heels of a widow, the cracked sandals of a priest. You always look down when you clean, not to avoid the horror, but because you know the wood. And you can tell where someone hesitated, where they kicked, where they knelt stiff with pride. The stains speak if you know how to listen. Sometimes late at night you dream of the sound, not the crowd, not the thump of the head in the basket, but the blade, that precise metallic whisper just before impact. The slicing hum of edge through air. It follows you like perfume. You've tried everything. Lavender sprigs in your pockets. Soap stolen from a noble's abandoned house. Candles dipped in honey and rose. Nothing hides it. The scent of blood isn't just in your clothes. It's in your lungs, your chest, your very breath. A girl once tried to speak with you near the market. Her smile was gentle. She sold bread with raisins in it. When she leaned close, her nose wrinkled. She didn't say anything, but she stepped back. You understood. No one wants to bring death home, even if it comes wrapped in a clean shirt. Still, you are paid, not well, but enough. A ration of wine, a handful of coins, bread when there's enough to go around, and sometimes, rarely, you're given a new rag or brush. The irony is not lost on you. You clean death, and you're rewarded with the tools to clean more death. You do not question it anymore. The city is a theatre of collapse. People vanish overnight. The baker who served you last week is gone, replaced by someone younger, thinner, quieter. Names are dangerous now, so are memories. You live like a beetle under a stone, damp, low, and unnoticed. and still the blood calls each morning. Pooled in the corners, congealed between boards, it never stops, and neither it seems to you. You never meant to do this. That much you remember. You weren't drawn to death, you were pushed toward it. A cousin worked the scaffold stairs as a wood hauler. He'd gone deaf in one ear from the crowds, and one night over cheap wine he said, "They're looking for someone who doesn't gag easy." You didn't ask what for, you needed the coin, that was all. You showed up the next morning and a man in a tricolour sash looked you over like a butcher selecting meat. He didn't ask your name, just handed you a brush and pointed to a dark stain near the chute. "Start there," he said. That was 3 winters ago. Or was it 4? Time has rusted into a blur. You've worked through snow, through rain, through days where the blade stuck and the crowd gasped as if their opera had missed a note. You kept scrubbing. There's a moment every day when you hate it. Not when the head drops, not when the brain matter spatters your boots. It's just before, when the condemned mounts the steps. There's something awful in that climb. You see their backs, the way they move. Some shuffle, some stumble, some walk straight and still as if their legs belong to someone else. That moment holds the weight of everything, because you know in 10 seconds they will fall like meat, and you'll be there with your bucket wiping the final seconds of their life off the wood. The worst ones aren't the ones who cry, it's the ones who smile, who hum, who kneel without needing to be told. You never look them in the eye. That's your rule. It used to be a kindness, now it's a shield. You work fast. That's how you stay sane. Each morning you arrive before the crowd, you test the bolts on the side rails, sweep the stage with your foot to feel for splinters or swelling in the planks. The scaffold shifts in the rain. It groans like an old dog rising. You whisper to it sometimes. "Not yet," you'll mutter. When the blade slides slow, you're not sure why you talk to it. Maybe it's the only thing that hasn't vanished. Executioners come and go. Guards rotate. But the guillotine stays, solid, tall, a monument to red-streaked wood and rusting iron. She's got a name whispered among cleaners like you, La Veuve, the widow. Some even say she listens, that she knows who deserves mercy and who does not. You don't believe that, not really. But when she jams, you wonder. There's a rhythm to your work, and it's the only thing that keeps your thoughts from unravelling. Blade, drop, thud, silence. Then, scrape, wipe, rinse. You move like a dancer between the stains. Quick steps, pivot, lean, scrub. The crowd watches always. Some are pale, some laugh. Some bring apples and snack like they're at a puppet show. You've heard children giggle as heads fall. That stays with you. Not the blood, not the smell, the children. Their tiny gasps, their sticky fingers pointing. Sometimes you hear one say, "Encore," and that is when you press the rag harder. As if you could erase more than blood, as if you could scrub the whole world clean. Once, a man slipped as they tied him down. He fell forward, and the blade grazed his neck. It didn't kill him. There was panic, screams. The executioner cursed. They dragged the man back into place and reset. You were the one who cleaned between attempts. 3 strokes that day. You washed while he was still breathing. The blood had its own rhythm then, spurts, not pools. He looked at you once, just once, and you saw it. Not fear, but apology. You couldn't bear it. That night you drank yourself blind. Woke up in a ditch outside Rue des Martyrs, your coat missing, your boots half stolen, and the word butcher scratched into your arm in red. You wore long sleeves for weeks after that, not because of the wound, but because you weren't sure if they were wrong. You've thought about leaving. Truly. Once, during a frost-laced morning when no executions were scheduled and the square lay quiet as a grave, you stood at the edge of the scaffold and stared north. Past the rooftops, past the haze of chimney smoke. You could walk, you thought. Take the back roads, shave your beard, disappear, start again in a village where no one knows your smell, but then you heard it. The wheel of the cart squeaking down Rue Saint-Honoré. The creak of the scaffold under another man's boots. The world had remembered you. Or maybe it had never forgotten. So you dipped your brush, bent your back, and began again. There are others like you. Not many, but enough. The scaffold cleaners, the ragmen, the vinegar boys. You sometimes nod when you see one near the Palais. You don't speak, you don't ask names. That's the quiet pact you all share. You can tell each other apart from the way you carry the bucket. Not by the walk, but by the wrist. Always tilted slightly away from the hip so the spatter doesn't touch your trousers. It's a detail that outsiders never notice, but you all do. You once saw a younger boy try to brag, claimed he'd cleaned 20 heads in a day, smiled about it. An older cleaner, grizzled and silent, took his bucket and dumped it on the boy's boots. "Now you've earned one," he said. No one laughed. There's no pride in the work, just endurance. You don't keep mementos. Others do. Scraps of ribbon, a button that popped free from a noble's coat, a single card from a gambler's pocket. But not you. You learned early what souvenirs become. Ghosts. You kept a locket once. It had been clutched tight in a girl's hand when her head dropped. A silver oval with nothing inside. Just a hinge and a scent, lavender and ash. You didn't mean to take it. It was stuck to your sleeve, crusted with what was left of her. You brought it home, placed it in a box beside your cot. And that night, she came. Not as a figure, but as a sound. Breathing. Just breathing. In and out, behind your ear, though the room was still. You returned the locket the next day, buried it beneath the scaffold's edge, and said nothing. Since then, you keep nothing. Not even coins from pockets. You've learned. Blood remembers. There is no training for your work. No instruction. You learn from watching, from scrubbing wrong, from smelling the difference between clean wood and sour wood. You learned the hard way not to kneel too close after a rainy execution. Blood seeps wider when the grain is swollen. You learned how to brace your feet so you don't slip when the heads are heavy. You learned to drink only after, not before, because even a little wine makes the smell stronger, not duller. You taught yourself how to time your movements with the fall of the blade so you never make the crowd wait too long. That's the strange part, isn't it? They want a show, but they don't want to see the mess. You're the gap between spectacle and silence. The thing that stitches one scream to the next. You've cleaned all types. Thin blood, thick blood, nobles, bakers. Girls so young you still hear nursery songs in the rhythm of your brushstrokes. Once a monk with a red birthmark across his scalp. Another time a soldier who saluted as he lay down. And most recently, a woman with no shoes, just wrappings of linen and mud. You wonder sometimes what their final thoughts were. If they noticed the sky. If they tasted blood in their mouths from fear. If they thought of a loved one. Or if they noticed you, waiting below with your bucket, your brush. You hope they didn't. You never wanted to be part of someone's final memory. You just wanted to eat. There are mornings when your hands tremble. Not from fear, but from fatigue. The bones in your fingers ache with a deep, wet cold that no glove can cure. You tried wrapping your hands in cloth, it soaked through. You tried using soap from the convent. It cracked your knuckles so deep they bled. You've come to accept the marks. The dark red grooves beneath your fingernails. The strange way your palms have toughened in patches, like boiled leather. When you pass a mirror, which isn't often, you barely look. Your face is unfamiliar now, not older, just more worn, smoothed by routine, etched by silence. You don't look at yourself because you're not the one who needs to be seen. You're background, a necessary shadow into the corner of history's photograph. At night sometimes you hear it even when there's no execution scheduled. The crowd, the wooden creak, the hush just before the blade falls. You rise from your cot, breath caught in your chest, half expecting to see the platform out your window. But it's just a moonlit alley and the distant bark of a drunkard. You settle back down, heart pounding, and listen to your own breathing. Slow, uncertain. You've come to believe that the guillotine doesn't sleep. Not really. She just waits, and so do you. You've learned to listen differently. Not just to voices, but to the way air shifts. There's a certain stillness before they bring the next one up. A lull in the crowd, like everyone's holding their breath. You can almost hear hearts pounding. Even the horses go quiet. You use that moment to prepare. You wet the cloth, twist it twice, move toward the side where blood pools fastest. You've mapped the scaffold by absorption rate. That back left corner soaks quickest. The centre stains slowest. If you close your eyes, you could scrub it blind. And sometimes you do, because your eyes are tired, and seeing too much in this job is dangerous. You listen, you move, you wipe, and when it's clean or clean enough, you retreat without a word. You're not the first to hold this job, of course. There was a man before you named Lucien. No one knows what happened to him. Some say he took his own head with the blade, crawled under it drunk and shouted "Vive la Révolution" before the cord was pulled. Others say he simply vanished, walked off one night after the last execution and never returned. You found his boot once, buried behind the supply crate, toe scuffed and split. Inside was a folded scrap of paper with just one word: enough. You didn't take it as a warning. You took it as truth. You haven't mentioned Lucien to anyone, not even the new guards. Some things don't need to be remembered out loud. You're good at becoming invisible. That's the only way to survive. You stand to the side during the speeches. You blend into the background when the officers gather. Even the executioner forgets you're there until he nearly slips on your soap trail. You've watched history unfold from 10 feet away, and it never sees you. You saw Danton fall, mouth twisted, eyes blazing, even in death. You saw a bishop soil himself moments before the blade came down. You saw a former friend cry out your name, but you didn't answer. You kept scrubbing. You told yourself it wasn't really him, just someone who looked like him. That's how you stay sane. You keep your world narrow. Just the plank, the rag, the bucket, and the stains you chase, even though you know they'll return by morning. Sometimes the stains feel like stories. Each pattern is a name you'll never speak. The streak down the front rail from the midwife. The wide spatter near the second step from the banker who wept. You learn to read lives by their endings. Some fight, some surrender, some pray, but all leave the same thing behind: a body and the need for someone like you. You don't take pride in that, but you don't turn away either. There's a strange comfort in the repetition, in the rhythm, in knowing exactly what needs to be done no matter what chaos surrounds it. The revolution changes laws, leaders, slogans, but the blood never changes. It always dries brown. It always cracks when scrubbed too late. It always wins if you're not quick. You've tried to write once or twice just to remember who you were before this. You borrowed paper from a printing apprentice and ink from a shop that burned down a week later. You sat in the corner of your room, hands still red from work, and tried to write your name. But the letters looked foreign, the shape of them wrong. You tried a sentence, "I was born in Ditton," but your hand froze. Where were you born? You remember a farmhouse or a tenement? Was there a river nearby? You see flashes of trees, of a laughter, of someone's hands in your hair. But it all runs like ink in the rain. You folded the paper, placed it under the mattress, and haven't touched it since. The past is slippery, and you need dry footing to stand here. And so the days keep passing. The same, never the same, always different enough to remind you you're still alive. You hear rumours of change, of trials ending, of leaders falling, but it means little to you. You measure time by the wear in your brush handle, by how long vinegar takes to sting your cuts, by the way the sky shifts from blue to ash before the carts arrive. You keep your coat by the door, your boots lined with rags, and your bucket always clean before it's dirty again. That's the life of a guillotine cleaner. You're not a hero, you're not a villain, you're a witness, and you scrub because someone must. One afternoon, just as the bells of Saint Roch were tolling noon, you watched a young man walk up the scaffold steps barefoot. He had no shoes, no shirt, just a pair of stained trousers and a scrap of cloth tied around his wrist. He didn't resist, didn't tremble. His hair was damp, like he'd been caught in rain or tears. When the executioner gestured, the boy knelt too early and waited, patient as stone. You moved to the edge, cloth in hand. The blade fell. The crowd gasped, and something in the way his body collapsed stuck with you. It was too gentle, too resigned, as if he had died long before the steel touched him. That night, you returned home and found your water bucket still full. You hadn't rinsed a thing. The blood was still on your brush. The scent, sweet and metallic, filled the room. You sat beside it for hours, unable to move. There are things you learn to carry, not physically, though your arms have grown strong from lifting wet rags and heavy planks, but mentally. You carry the sounds, the little noises no one else seems to hear. The hush of cloth sliding off a shoulder. The faint wetness of a last breath. The way the crowd murmurs when someone important dies, as if the death somehow means more. You carry those sounds like stones in your pockets. You try to let them go, but they cling. At night, they echo in the cracks of your ceiling. You wake up sometimes with your hands clenched, as if scrubbing in your sleep. You've broken 2 fingernails that way. You no longer bandage them, you just let them bleed. There was a week last spring when the blade broke, snapped halfway through a sentence of death. You were there, close enough to feel the shudder in the wood. The condemned man screamed. Not from pain, from disbelief. The executioner barked orders. You were told to clean quickly, quietly, and without drawing attention. The next blade was thinner, sharper, faster. You helped bolt it into place with trembling fingers. It sang when it dropped, a pure, horrifying whistle that made a woman in the front row faint. You didn't flinch, you couldn't. Your hands were inside the stain already, smoothing the vinegar, scraping the crust. You remember thinking, this is what progress feels like. Colder, quicker, less forgiving. You didn't sleep that night or the next. You've stopped trying to explain what you do. The last time you tried, the listener asked, "So, you're like a janitor?" You nodded. That was easier than explaining how you mop up dignity, how you rinse away the last trace of a scream, how you kneel beside the place where someone's entire life ended in one blink and try to make it look like it never happened. Janitor, yes, but not of mess, of memory. You erase things no one wants to admit existed, and in doing so you carry them alone. Not everyone can handle that. You're not even sure you can. But here you are, still scrubbing. There's a smell you'll never describe properly. It's not just blood. It's the combination of fear and finality. Sweat that doesn't belong to labour. The dampness of clothes wet from more than rain. You've come to recognise it like a dog recognises thunder. Something primal, something you can't reason away. When it hits your nose, you go still. You reach for the brush instinctively, like a soldier reaching for his weapon. And then you move forward, into the cloud, into the aftermath, into whatever remains. That's your job. Not to judge, not to pause, just to go where others turn away. You heard once, whispers only, that the revolution would eat itself, that the blade would turn back on those who fed it, and you've seen it begin, the faces of accusers becoming the accused, a clerk 1 week, a corpse the next. A man shouting slogans today, then gagged tomorrow. It changes nothing for you. The stains stay the same. Whether it's a king or a cobbler, the blood still dries the same colour, still sticks to your boots, still smells like iron and regret. You tell yourself history is someone else's problem, yours is just the floor beneath it. There was a boy once, couldn't have been more than 12, who tried to look over the edge of the scaffold while you worked. His mother was scolding him, whispering fierce warnings under her breath, but he kept tugging free. You caught his eye for only a second. He grinned, not cruelly, curiously. You saw in his face the kind of fascination you'd once had for fire. That innocent awe at something so powerful, so final. You wanted to tell him, don't look too long, this doesn't leave you. But you didn't say a word. You turned back to the wood, dipped your cloth and wiped a dark corner that hadn't yet dried. You never saw him again, but even now sometimes you wonder if he remembers your face more clearly than the head that fell before him. Your boots never fully dry. No matter how long you leave them by the fire, there's always some dampness in the soles. You've grown used to the cold that seeps up from your feet, like punishment crawling back into your bones. The worst days are after rain, when the puddles on the scaffold soak through everything. You tried once to go barefoot, thinking it might be easier to wash your skin than your leather. You lasted one morning. Splinters found your heel. The plank flexed like a wet tongue. The blood was warmer than you expected. That sensation, the mix of body heat and guilt, stayed with you for weeks. You still catch echoes of it now, whenever your heel throbs at night. You've seen women executed with ribbons still tied in their hair, men with medals pinned to their chests. One girl came with a wedding ring still on her finger, so loose it nearly slipped off before the blade did its work. You didn't take it. You wiped around her hand gently, slower than usual. Someone in the crowd shouted, "Hurry!" but you ignored it. She deserved more than a hasty rinse. You made sure her hand left the world cleaner than her neck. That night you scrubbed your own hands raw, as if the memory of her had stained you deeper than blood. Sometimes it feels that way, like grief is a kind of dirt that vinegar can't touch. When you walk through the city now, you move like smoke. You weave between bodies without brushing sleeves. You speak only when spoken to, and even then, you keep your voice low, measured, soft, like someone praying not to be heard. You buy your bread from a baker who never asks your name. You trade for soap with a woman who never makes eye contact. The whole world feels hushed, as if everyone's afraid of waking the wrong spirit. You wonder sometimes if that's what the revolution has become, not a cry for justice, but a citywide whisper, hoping not to be next. You've stopped asking what anyone believes in anymore. Belief doesn't keep your hands warm. They sent a poet once. You remember because he tried to speak, tried to recite a line before the blade came down. You didn't catch the words, just the rhythm. Soft and strange, like a lullaby hummed through broken teeth. His mouth still moved as his head fell. You cleaned the stains in silence. And that night, something odd happened. You dreamed not of blood, but of ink, of smudged pages and torn books and hands stained not with red, but with black. You woke up gasping, thinking your room was on fire. But it was just your breath, fast and loud in the cold. You've never read much. But now, sometimes you wonder what the poet tried to say, what verse he thought would carry him past the blade. You wonder if words can ever save a man. You doubt it. But still, you wonder. There's a part of the scaffold most people never see. A small trap door beneath the main platform, where old buckets go, where worn brushes are tossed, where dried rags stiffen into sculpted shapes of former motion. You go there when the world above feels too loud. You sit among the cast-offs, knees hugged to chest, and let the scent of old blood and vinegar settle around you like a blanket. It's horrible, but it's yours. You've carved your name into the beam there. Not your real name, not the one you were born with, but the one the city gave you. The cleaner. You scratched it deep, rough lines, barely legible. It's not for pride, it's to remind yourself someone was here, someone endured. And if the world forgets you, at least the wood will not. There's always one in the crowd who watches you more than the blade. A man in a tall hat. A woman with her hands clasped too tightly. A girl whose gaze never wavers. You can feel it as you work. The weight of eyes not drawn to spectacle but to aftermath. They study you. Wonder what kind of person does this. You never look back. You keep your shoulders turned, your movements smooth. Let them guess. Let them imagine you sleep soundly, that you hum while you scrub, that you forget every name before the basket's even emptied. The truth wouldn't satisfy them. The truth isn't neat. It clings. You've left pieces of yourself on that stage every day. Skin in the grain, breath in the boards, silence between the screams. You don't need anyone's curiosity. You just need clean water. The wood itself has changed. You notice it one morning in late autumn. The planks have darkened, absorbed too much. They creak louder now, not from age, but from grief. You swear sometimes that the scaffold sags, that it leans inward like a beast bowing under its own weight. You mentioned it once to a guard, he laughed. It's wood, he said, not a priest. But you know better. You kneel on that platform every day. You feel the pulse in it, the tension, the weariness. It's no longer just a place, it's a witness. And like you, it remembers too much. You began cleaning it differently after that, gentler. Not out of respect, but out of mutual fatigue. You and the wood have seen enough. You remember the first time you touched a severed head. It wasn't part of your job, but it had fallen wrong or rolled near your foot and the crowd was already murmuring. You bent down, lifted it with both hands. It was lighter than you expected. Warm, eyes closed, mouth slightly open as if mid-thought. You placed it in the basket without looking again. The rest of the day your fingers felt strange, like they'd been dipped in something sacred and sour. You washed them twice as long that night, scrubbed until your knuckles split. But the feeling stayed. Still lingers if you're honest. That weightless warmth, that final breathless silence. You've touched countless things since, rags, buckets, nails, but none left a mark like that boy's head. You never learned his name. You don't want to. It's easier to call him the first. Sometimes it rains during the executions, fat drops that fall like coins on the scaffold. The wood turns slick and your brush dances across it like a skater on a frozen pond. The crowd thins when it rains, but not always. Some people bring umbrellas, others just hunch forward, unwilling to miss the show. You move slower on those days. The stains spread wider. The air smells different. Wet metal, old meat, something almost floral in the rot. You used to hate the rain. Now it feels like company. A soft drumbeat against the world's madness. A veil between you and the crowd. You still work, of course, but you don't mind getting wet. It's the only time the blood doesn't feel like the loudest thing on your skin. You've been told more than once that this can't last, that the terror will end, that someone new will rise, a general maybe, or a council, or the mob itself. You don't care. You've stopped listening to dates and decrees. They don't change what you wake up to. They don't empty your bucket. They don't lift the stains. You've outlasted ministers, trials, slogans. You've watched parades become processions, watched cheers become silence. You know better than to trust the promise of peace. Peace doesn't clean anything, it just pauses the mess. And then, when it returns, it's worse, stickier, older, more permanent. You've seen enough to know that blood never leaves quietly. There are rumours of you now, stories whispered in alleys and cellar bars. Some say you're cursed, that your touch draws death, that you don't age. Others say you pray before each cleaning, that you collect the names, that you mutter them like spells. You do none of that, but you let the rumours live. They keep people distant, make space around you. In a city where closeness can get you killed, a little superstition is safer than a handshake. You've grown used to the solitude, to the echo of your own steps, to the quiet that follows every fall of the blade. It's not loneliness, it's survival. There's a cat that visits sometimes, thin, with matted fur and a tail that twitches like it's remembering better days. It comes in the mornings, when the square is still empty and the sky wears that soft grey hue before dawn. It doesn't beg, it doesn't purr, it just watches you work, yellow eyes half-lidded, head cocked. Once, you dropped a crust of bread near the edge of the platform, sniffed it, sneezed, and walked away. Another time, you whispered to it, "This is no place for creatures like you." The cat blinked slowly and stayed. You've taken to calling it Robe, short for Robespierre, not that you'd say that aloud. It's comforting, in a strange way, to have something alive nearby. Something that doesn't flinch at the stains, something that sees you and doesn't look away. You've learned to breathe through your mouth when it's fresh, right after the fall. Before the crowd starts cheering or gasping, before the blood thickens and the flesh cools, that's when it's strongest. The heat, the scent, the unmistakable wetness of life being cut short. If you breathe too deep through your nose, you taste it. Copper and salt and something that buzzes behind your teeth. You used to gag. First week you vomited 3 times behind the stage. No one helped. The guards laughed. The executioner handed you a rag and said, "Get used to it." You did. You had to. Now your stomach doesn't move and your eyes don't water. But your breath, shallow, measured, always stays in your mouth. Even in sleep, your lips part slightly. A habit learned too well. One day they brought a man who smiled the whole time, from the cart to the scaffold, from the binding of his arms to the drop of the blade. A perfect, unbroken smile, not defiant, not mad, serene, as if he were attending his own wedding. You scrubbed that day a little slower, not from reverence, from unease. The blood had pooled evenly, no mess, no struggle, it was too clean. You found yourself waiting for something, an echo, a gasp, anything, but no, there was only the wind and the creak of your own boots. That night you dreamed of him. Not his death, his smile. You saw it in your room, on your wall, on your hands. You've never forgotten it. You've bled since, bruised since, wept since. But that smile, it stayed. Like it knew something you never will. The scaffold changes with the seasons. In summer, the wood dries fast and leaves white salt rings where the blood once spread. In winter, the stains turn dark and take hours to lift, your fingers going numb before the last streak disappears. Spring is the worst. Everything smells stronger, more alive. Death clings to the air like a fever. And in autumn, the flies come, not a few. Clouds, swarms, they land on everything. They nest in the corners of the basket. They buzz in your ears, in your eyes. You've taken to wearing a cloth over your mouth on those days. Not for your safety, for your sanity. But still, they find their way in. And later, when you sit by the fire, you feel them crawling beneath your skin. Ghosts with wings, tiny witness. You once saw an execution halted. A man from the south, sun, dark skin, sharp eyes, refused to kneel. Not out of protest, but because he claimed his gods forbade it. "Let me stand," he said, and the crowd went quiet. The officials whispered. The executioner scratched his beard. In the end, they let him. He stood tall, hands bound, face toward the rising sun. The blade still fell, of course, still sang its final song, but it hit differently, sounded deeper, heavier. The wood cracked beneath him in a new way. You wiped it clean. Took longer than usual. You could still feel the weight of his stare in the blood. as if it were watching you scrub, judging you, forgiving you. You never decided which. Sometimes you talk to the dead, not in words, not aloud, but in small motions. A pause before you rinse, a second cloth for a smaller stain, a whisper of breath that feels like a nod. You don't believe in ghosts, but you believe in memory, in the way moments cling to matter, in how the planks beneath your hands feel heavier some days, not with rain, but with the burden of what's been done atop them. You don't ask for forgiveness, you don't expect it. But some part of you hopes that if there is something after this, if there's a reckoning, you'll be seen not as a monster, but as a man who stayed, who cleaned, who bore witness when no one else would. There was a time, not long ago, but it feels distant, when you thought this was temporary, that the guillotine would be dismantled, that the blood would dry for good, that you'd return to something softer, maybe carpentry, maybe farming, something with clean smells and honest sweat. But now, you no longer plan for afterward. There is no afterward. There's only the next stain, the next plank, the next chill that settles into your wrists before the vinegar bites. Hope isn't something you've abandoned. It's something you folded carefully, wrapped in linen, and tucked away in a place you don't go anymore. Not because it's lost, but because you can't afford to see it every day and keep working. You know the guards by the sound of their footsteps. Francois walks with a drag, as if one leg is chained to memory. Claude whistles too much, off-key and nervous. The new boy, Jules, tries to sound like gravel but squeaks like leather. You don't speak to them unless needed. They don't ask questions unless forced. You're all cogs in the same grotesque wheel, spinning until something breaks. Still, sometimes you catch Jules watching you with something close to pity, or curiosity. You think he's trying to decide if you're a man or a ghost pretending to be one. You don't mind. You'd wonder too. After all, you move through this world without leaving ripples. That's how you survive. There was one execution, just one, that broke your rhythm. A mother and daughter, accused of harbouring traitors. You didn't see the trial, you never do, you only see the end. They brought them up together. The mother walked first, straight-backed, jaw firm. The daughter stumbled, clinging to her hand. Someone tried to separate them. The mother slapped his hand away. She helped the girl kneel, whispered something. You'll never forget how her hand stayed on the girl's back, even as the blade fell. The crowd went silent, just for a breath. Then came the second fall, and you moved like always. But your hand shook. The cloth slipped. You dropped the bucket. The vinegar splashed across your boots, and you didn't even flinch. That was the only time you wept while cleaning. You told no one. The smell of vinegar is everywhere. In your sheets, in your hair, behind your teeth. It clings to you more fiercely than blood. You've tried to replace it, lemons, herbs, wine, but it always returns. People step aside when you pass, but not because they know what you do. It's the scent. It speaks louder than uniforms. It marks you like a brand. You've grown used to it, even fond of it in a strange way. It's not pleasant, but it's honest, no perfume, no disguise, just the truth of what you are, a man soaked in cleaning what others try to forget. You wonder what your scent will be when you die, if anyone will notice, or if the vinegar will outlast even that. There's a drawer in your room filled with things you'll never use. A spoon with a chipped edge, a comb missing 3 teeth, a sock with no partner. You don't know why you keep them. Maybe because they're broken, like you. Maybe because throwing them away feels like giving up. You tell yourself they might be needed someday, but that day never comes. They gather dust, like old promises, like names you once knew. Some nights you take them out, arrange them on your mattress, and stare. They don't speak, but they remind you that you still possess something, that you haven't given everything to the stains. Not yet. The wind feels different now, colder, even when the sun's out. Sharper at the edges, it snakes down your collar as you climb the scaffold stairs and settles in your bones. You've started wearing a second shirt beneath your coat, not for warmth, but to feel like there's a barrier, however thin, however pointless. Anything to soften the weight of what you do. The blade doesn't wait for weather. It falls in sun or sleet. But the wind, it carries more than cold. It carries whispers, laughter, screams muffled by fabric. You try not to listen, but sometimes when the wind hits just right, you swear you hear your own name. Not the one you answer to now, but the one you buried long ago, before the stains. Some days you clean before anyone arrives. Not because it needs doing, because it helps you feel like you're ahead of it. Like maybe, just for a breath, you've claimed the scaffold for yourself. There's something in that silence, the kind of silence that only comes before a crowd gathers, before the weight of the day has begun. You run your fingers over the grain of the wood. You don't wipe anything yet. Just feel. It's smooth in places, rough in others. Some parts are dark as dried ink, others worn pale from weather and salt. It's become a kind of map, this platform. You know every rise and dip, every knot where a knee landed hard, every spot where blood dried too fast. The scaffold doesn't judge you, doesn't ask why you keep showing up, it just exists, like you. There was a girl who sold chestnuts by the square, maybe 16, freckled, quiet. You saw her almost every day, always setting up just before the first drop. She never watched the executions, kept her back to them, tending her little pan of coals, shelling nuts with the fingers that moved like clockwork. One day you found a folded paper bag on your steps. Inside, chestnuts, still warm. No note, no name, just the scent of salt and ash and something that might have been, a kindness. You didn't eat them, you couldn't, but you kept the bag, folded it smaller and smaller until it fit in your coat's hidden pocket. It's still there, a tiny soft corner in a life-scraped raw. You don't speak to the girl, she doesn't speak to you, but you always nod and she always nods back. There was one time, only once, when you saw someone laugh on the scaffold. Not in madness, in joy. A woman, tall and regal, with silver streaks in her braid. She walked up the steps like she was greeting old friends, blew a kiss to the crowd, smiled at the sky. When they laid her down, she whispered something to the blade. You couldn't hear it, but you saw her lips move. After the fall, her blood came fast, bright, startling, clean. You wiped it gently, slowly. Something in your chest hurt as you did. Like you'd been spoken to, though no words had passed between you. That night, the blade stuck for the first time in weeks. You blamed the damp, but part of you wondered if she'd cursed it, or blessed it. You still don't know which. You've noticed the sky more lately, the way it changes from slate to bruise to fire in a single day. You used to ignore it, just another backdrop behind the wooden frame. But now, sometimes you pause at the top of the scaffold and look up. Let your eyes rest there. Pretend, for just a heartbeat, that you're a man who builds instead of cleanse. That your hands smell of cedar and lime, not vinegar and rot. That the breeze on your face is just wind, not the echo of another scream. You don't believe in escape, but you believe in pauses, and sometimes the sky gives you one. There's a rhythm to how people fall. You've started noticing it. Not just the thump, but the way limbs land. Some curl inward, some sprawl like they've been flung, some remain stiff like statues unwilling to let go. You try not to read into it, but your mind is hungry even now. It wants to find meaning, wants to believe that there's something in how a person leaves the world, that it says something about how they lived. You don't write these things down, you just remember. A foot twisted left, a hand still clutching air, a face turned toward you, as if asking something wordless. And always, always your reply is the same. Scrub, rinse, repeat, because you're not the one with answers. You're the one with a rag. The officials don't look at you. Not really. They nod sometimes. Leave folded notices on the barrel behind the scaffold. Tell you when extra executions have been added to the week. But they never ask how you're doing. Never wonder what happens to the blood when the show ends. Maybe they think it disappears. That the rain takes care of it. That history cleans itself. You know better. You've seen what lingers, what stains, what rises in the steam when you pour hot water on old boards. History doesn't erase, it seeps, and you're the one who lives in the seepage. The gap between spectacle and silence, the after. You dream less than you used to, or maybe you dream the same, but the dreams have stopped making sense. They don't tell stories anymore. They show flashes, a boot slipping on wet wood, a pail tipping over, fingers, yours, clutching a splintered edge. Once you dreamed of silence so heavy it cracked the world in two. No blood, no people, just the sound of nothing pressing against your ribs until they gave. You woke up gasping, hand over your heart like it had tried to escape you in the night. You used to think dreams meant something. Now you think they're just echoes. Scraps of a mind trying not to rot. like the scaffold, like you. The local priest passes by sometimes, but he doesn't bless the scaffold, never has. You've watched him glance at it, cross himself quickly, and hurry past like it might curse him through his boots. You don't blame him. There's something sacred and profane about this place, something that doesn't fit into prayers. You tried once, years ago, to whisper a blessing of your own. Just 3 words. You don't even remember what they were, but the blade dropped harder that day. The basket cracked, and the woman who fell had been humming. It was enough to convince you, this wood doesn't want forgiveness. It wants silence. So that's what you offer it day after day. Quiet hands, quiet breath, quiet eyes. You sometimes wonder what happens to the soul after the blade falls. Not out of belief, more out of curiosity. You've seen too many faces in those last seconds to think death is simple. Some eyes flash with peace, others with terror. Some seem already gone before the blade even drops, and then there are those who look straight into your face as they fall like you're the last thing they'll carry into the dark. You try not to take that personally, but you feel it, tucked behind your ribs, beside whatever part of you still keeps track of how many it's been. You've lost count, long ago, but your bones remember. Your spine curves with the memory of bodies. Your fingers twitch with the rhythm of rinse, wipe, scrape. The soul might rise, but the stains, they stay. Your hands are not what they once were. They're thicker now, not from strength but from use. The skin across your knuckles is split in 6 places, healed and rebroken too many times to count. You've grown calluses in strange shapes. Oval from the frag's twist. Crescent from the bucket's lip. Once, someone asked if you were a butcher. You nodded. It was easier than explaining the truth. Easier than unpacking what it means to scrape away the remains of history every day and still walk home like a man. Your nails are always rimmed in shadow. You keep your sleeves long. But nothing truly hides the hands that work the scaffold. People know, even if they don't say it, they know. One morning, a dove landed on the edge of the platform. Pale, clean, weightless. It stayed there even as the crowd gathered. Even as the ropes were drawn, even as the head fell. You expected it to flee, but it didn't. It just looked at you, cocked its small white head and blinked. You paused, just for a moment, then went back to your work. When you finished, the dove was gone. No feathers left, no trace. You never saw it again. But sometimes when the wind shifts, you feel a brush of air beside your cheek. Not cold, not warm, just present. And in that moment, you remember the dove, and how, just for a blink, something unbloodied shared your stage. You've thought about writing your story, not for others, for yourself, to leave a mark deeper than the stains. But the words never come. You start with one line, then scratch it out. Nothing sounds true, nothing sounds enough. How do you explain what it's like to know a person only by how they fall? To recognize dignity in the shape of a footprint? To carry the memory of every red streak like a tally on your soul? There's no ink dark enough, no page wide enough. So you fold the paper, put it away. Instead, you keep the story in your routine, in the twist of your wrist, in the way you always begin with the back left corner, in the way you never whistle while you work, in the way you look away, not from the death, but from the eyes. You've started counting footsteps, from your door to the scaffold, 87, from the edge of the stage to the basket, 6, from the steps down to your bucket's resting place, 11. Numbers calm you. They're clean, predictable, unlike blood, unlike memory. You've noticed that on days when the crowds are loudest, you walk slower, stretching each count like taffy. Not because you're tired, because you want to delay the noise, the roar. The moment the blade sings, math is quiet. It doesn't cry. It doesn't beg. You cling to that. In a world where screams are currency, counting is your only silent rebellion. Some days the officials make jokes, small ones, cold ones, the kind that break like bone under too much pressure. Another red morning, they'll mutter. Paint's still wet. You never laugh. Not because you're noble, because you can't afford to find it funny. You've seen too much of what they're joking about. You've wiped teeth from the planks. You've rinsed curls of hair from between boards. You've slipped on entrails, laughed, and you might never stop, so you keep your mouth shut. Let the others chuckle. Let them pretend they're spectators. You know the truth. No one who stands this close is innocent. You were given new boots last month. Not a gift, an accident. A clerk had extras. Your old ones had holes so wide they swallowed pebbles like soup. The new pair was stiff, too clean. You hated them, wore them once, slipped on the scaffold and nearly cracked your spine. So you went back to the old pair, patched them with scraps, stuffed wool into the toes. They squeak now, faintly, but they grip better. They remember your feet. And in this job, memory is everything. You don't need shine. You need sure footing. The scaffold won't forgive a misstep, and neither will the crowd. You've heard songs drift from the crowd sometimes, little ones, fragments, hummed or murmured as the condemned walks up. Once a lullaby. Once something that might have been a drinking song. Once the Marseillaise, slow and thick with sorrow. You don't sing. Not ever. Your voice feels foreign in your throat. You used to speak more. Jokes, greetings, short prayers. Now your voice is something you say for emergencies. Like a match in a storm, you keep it dry, unused, precious. When you do speak, people lean in, as if words from you matter more. They don't. They're just rare, and rare things always seem heavier. You watch their feet. That's something you've always done. Faces lie. Bodies freeze. But feet? Feet tell the truth. How a man shifts his weight. How a woman curls her toes. How a child, yes, they've sent children, tries to run but doesn't. You remember one pair of boots, tiny, polished, laced too tight. The boy wore them like armour. When he knelt, they creaked. And when the blade dropped, the laces stayed tied. That night you unwrapped your dinner and couldn't swallow. The sound of those boots creaking haunted you more than any scream. You don't remember his face, just the shine of those shoes. There was a week when the sky never cleared. Just clouds, heavy and low, like the whole city had been dropped inside a damp wool coat. No sun, no breeze. The executions went on, of course. Blood doesn't wait for weather. But everything felt slower, thicker. Even the crowd's voices were muffled, like they'd been stuffed with cotton. You wiped the same corner 3 times before realizing it was already clean. That week, the vinegar froze in the bucket once, thin film on top. You cracked it with your knuckles and watched the blood below bloom like a bruise. You remember thinking, this must be what history feels like. Cold, endless, quiet. And then you went back to scrubbing. You've stopped flinching at the sound of the blade. That doesn't mean you don't hear it. You do, every time. It's a sound that slices through thought, through breath, through the quiet place behind your eyes. But your body no longer reacts. Your shoulders stay still. Your jaw unclenched. It's not numbness. It's familiarity. You've come to know the sound the way a woodsman knows the crack of falling trees. The way a sailor knows the snap of a sail. The guillotine speaks in its own language. And like anyone who listens long enough, you've learned not to interrupt. You remember one day when no one showed up. A misprint on a flyer. Or a rescheduled trial. You arrived like always, set up the bucket, laid out your cloths, waited, but no carts came, no shouting, no crowd, just you and the empty square and the scaffold towering like a forgotten monument. You didn't leave, not for hours. You sat on the edge of the platform and stared at your hands. They looked younger in that quiet, less accused. You even laughed once, just a small breath through your nose. It sounded strange, hollow. When the sun finally dipped, you packed up and walked home. That night, you slept without dreaming, and in the morning the carts returned. There's a superstition among some of the other workers that if the blade sticks, the soul stays behind. You've heard them mutter it under their breath, seen them mark their palms with chalk. You don't believe in ghosts, but you do believe in impressions, in the way certain stains take longer to lift, in the way the wood seems heavier after certain deaths. Whether that's spirit or science, you don't care. You clean the same either way, but you've noticed something. When the blade sticks, you always wake up sore, like the weight of that unfinished death pulled something out of you, left a bruise where no one can see, and children ask questions. That's something adults forget. They think children are fragile, but you've seen them at the scaffold edge, eyes wide, mouths half open, soaking in everything. They ask things their parents never would. Do the heads still think? Does the blood hurt? Do you get lonely? You never answer, not because you don't know, because you do. And once you start answering, you're afraid you won't stop. You'll tell them how the blood makes your hands stink for days, how the eyes sometimes blink, how silence after a scream is louder than thunder. So you stay quiet. Let them wonder. Let their parents pull them away with shaking hands and forced smiles. It's better that way. Let innocence stay innocent. You once saw a man drop to his knees before the blade, not because he was ordered, because he wanted to pray. He clasped his hands, murmured something rapid and rhythmic, kissed the wood. The crowd laughed, but you didn't. You paused your work, let him finish. When the executioner scowled at you, you said nothing, just moved slower, more careful. That blood cleaned easier than most, as if the prayer had softened it, as if faith had loosened its grip. You don't pray anymore, but you remember his. And sometimes, when the wind's just right, you hear that rhythm again, in the rustle of leaves, in the creak of the scaffold rope, and for a moment, you believe he was heard. You still keep track of weather, not from habit, but from necessity. Rain means heavier stains, wind means more dirt to clear, cold means stiff fingers, heat means flies. You learn to read clouds the way sailors read the sea. You can smell rain before it comes. Feel the damp creeping into your knees before the first drop hits. No one else notices, but you do. Your work depends on it. Some days you wonder if you've become part animal. Nose in the wind, ears tuned to rustle, skin always braced. You don't mind. Animals survive. And in this city, survival is the only victory that matters. Once, a man handed you a coin. Just a single sou, pressed into your palm as he passed. He didn't look at you, didn't say a word, just kept walking, whistling something tuneless. You stared at the coin for a long time. It was still warm, greasy, the edge worn smooth by 1,000 hands. You didn't understand what it meant. Was it pity? Payment? A curse? You thought about throwing it away, but you didn't. Instead, you left it on the scaffold's edge the next morning. When you came back at dusk, it was gone. That night, 3 heads fell, and not one of them bled as much as usual. You told yourself it was coincidence. You told yourself not to believe in omens. But still, you never spent the coin. You sometimes imagine the guillotine as a mouth. Not a jaw, not a monster, just a hungry, waiting mouth. Open, patient, precise. It doesn't chew, does not bite. Just severs, swift and unblinking. And you're not its master. You're not even its keeper. You're the one who brushes its teeth, who wipes the corners of its lips when it's done feeding. It sounds ridiculous, even cruel. But when you've seen as much as you have, metaphors start to feel like medicine. They soften the edges, make the horror easier to hold. It's not that the blade wants death, it's that it needs it. And you, poor soul, are the cloth between its craving and the world. Your jacket used to be blue, a deep navy, thick wool, brass buttons. It was once part of a soldier's uniform. You found it abandoned in a heap outside the city, half buried in mud. It fit well enough. Warm, durable. But now it's something else entirely. The colour faded to ash. The cuffs torn. One pocket always damp no matter the weather. You keep wearing it anyway. People recognise you by it. The man in the butcher's coat, they whisper. It's not a butcher's coat. But it might as well be. You've stopped correcting them. You don't wear the jacket for warmth anymore. You wear it because it's the only thing left that still knows your shape. You've seen men break before the blade. Not at the moment of death, but long before, while waiting, standing in the cart, kneeling on splinters. You've seen them cry, shiver, try to bargain. You don't judge them. Why would you? You've heard how quiet the world becomes in those last seconds. Even the bravest lose something. You once saw a soldier wet himself while reciting his name. Another man sang a tavern song right up until the drop and screamed in the final heartbeat. It's not fear that surprises you, it's the honesty. There's no mask at the scaffold, only truth. Ugly, plain, sharp-edged truth. You clean it all the same. There's a rhythm to how you move, step, bend, scrub, rinse, ring, repeat. You do it without thinking now. Your body knows what to do even when your mind is far away. That's how you survive. You let the motion carry you like a tide. You used to resist it. Try to stay sharp, stay present. But that way lies madness. Now you flow, you glide, you fade. Sometimes you catch yourself halfway through a task and realise you don't remember starting it. That's when you pause, look at your hands, feel the rag, the wood, the cold vinegar in your bones. Then, without a word, you start again. You've begun to speak to the blade. Not often, not aloud. But when no one's around, you whisper beneath your breath. Nothing profound, just short things. You again. Easy now. That one didn't deserve it. It's absurd, you know it, but it helps, gives the thing a name, a shape, a boundary. You've never named it though, swimming feels too close, too dangerous. If you give it a name, it might answer, and you don't want to hear what it has to say, so you keep it distant, friendly but formal, like a neighbour you'd never let past the threshold. You clean it like a stranger, and pray it always stays one. There's an ache in your shoulders that never leaves. You've tried everything, stretching, heat, even a poultice from a woman who claimed she once served Marie Antoinette. Nothing works. It lives there now, in the meat of you, like a second spine. Some days it throbs with the rhythm of each drop blade. Other days it hums, quiet and constant, like a background drumbeat to your thoughts. You wonder if it will be the thing that ends you. Not the blood, not the memories, not the silence, but this slow, creeping weight that pulls your arms toward the ground. You picture yourself one day unable to lift the brush. And then what? Do they find another? Do they scrape your name from the board and move on? You wouldn't blame them. In this city, no job stays empty long, not even yours. You once found a flower on the scaffold, tucked between two planks, a small crushed violet. No note, no sign, just the scent. Faint, clinging, out of place. You picked it up with 2 fingers and turned it over like it might whisper. It didn't, but that night the blood came out easier. Wiped in one stroke, you tried to keep the flower, pressed it in a book you never read, but within days it turned to dust. Still, the smell lingered on your fingers for nearly a week. You didn't tell anyone. That kind of softness has no place here, but in quiet moments, you sometimes look at that space between the planks and wonder if it will ever appear again. You avoid the mirror now, not out of fear, out of disinterest. You know what's there. Hollow cheeks, red-rimmed eyes, a mouth that's forgotten how to curve. You've watched yourself age by inches, not from years, but from repetitions. The man in the glass isn't you anymore. He's the cleaner. He looks like a question no one wants answered. Sometimes you catch glimpses in puddles or polished metal, and you pause just for a moment to wonder what a stranger might see. Would they guess what you do? Would they flinch? Or would they just pass by, assuming you're another tired Parisian with vinegar in his veins? There's a guard who hums while the blade rises. Not every time, just when it's someone young. You don't know why. Maybe it's nerves. Maybe it's a kind of mercy. A lullaby for the condemned. At first it annoyed you. Now you almost miss it when it's absent. The tune changes sometimes. A folk song, a hymn. Once, a melody that sounded like your mother's voice, though that can't be right. You haven't thought of her in years. You don't speak to the guard, you wouldn't know what to say. But when he hums, you clean faster. Like the music smoothed the stains before you even touch them. Your body has begun to crave routine in strange ways. You eat the same bread from the same vendor. You fold your rag the same direction each morning. You take exactly 12 steps between your cot and the water pail. When something interrupts the pattern, a spill, a cough, a sudden cry, you feel it ripple through you like a cracked bell. It's not superstition, it's survival. Ritual keeps your soul from slipping, keeps your mind lashed to your bones. You suspect that if you ever changed your route home, you might never make it back, that the streets would close behind you and Paris would forget your shape. So you step where you've always stepped, you turn when you've always turned, and somehow you remain. You've seen death in all its disguises, raging, weeping, silent, resigned. You've seen eyes close like windows and mouths gape like open wounds. But the strangest death you ever saw was the one that looked like sleep. A boy, not yet 20, accused of theft. He lay down like he was tucking into bed. No resistance, no trembling. The blade fell and the body didn't twitch. You reached to wipe the stain and found none. Just a warmth, like breath exhaled. You stood there for a long time, rag in hand, waiting for something to clean. But there was nothing. That absence haunts you more than any blood. Because it meant maybe that not all deaths leave a mess, just most. Your dreams are darker now, not nightmares exactly. Those have passed. These are quieter, stranger. Dreams where the scaffold is a dinner table, and you're setting places with folded cloths. Where the guillotine sings lullabies, soft and metallic, and your hands move in rhythm, scrubbing invisible stains from your own skin. Once you dreamed the blade whispered your name, not the one you go by now, the one from before, the one you haven't heard aloud in years. You woke up gasping, your hand clenched around the brush like a weapon. There was no blood that morning, no execution, but you cleaned anyway, every inch of the platform, just in case the dream had left something behind. There's a boy who sells ink in the alley near the baker, always with black-stained fingers and a too big cap. You've never spoken to him, but he watches you sometimes as you pass, not with fear, with wonder. You don't like it, that look, as if you're part of some grand story, some tale of tragedy and duty. You want to tell him there's no poetry in this, no heroism, just buckets, just rags, just the sound of a city trying to forget what it had demanded. But you say nothing. You let him look. And later, when the vinegar stings your wrists, you wonder if he's still watching, still believing that you're more than a man with stains that won't wash out. Once, someone tried to bribe the executioner. A pouch of silver, promised to change everything, spare a friend, delay a death. You didn't see the deal, just the aftermath. The man in the basket had no head, but his hand still clutched a ribbon that wasn't his. The executioner said nothing, just nodded at you like always. But when you reached to clean, the blood was thick, coagulated too fast. It resisted, clung to the wood like it wanted to stay. You spent longer that day, kneeling, scrubbing, rinsing, like the stain wasn't from a body but from the lie wrapped around it. You didn't ask questions. You never do, but that night, your rag smelled of smoke. They burned a body once, not a criminal, not officially, just someone the crowd hated more than they feared. You weren't supposed to clean that. It wasn't on the scaffold. But someone still brought you a bucket, still handed you a rag, still pointed to the charred stones where bone had become dust. You remember thinking, this is new. You remember kneeling and brushing away ash like it was snow. The crowd had gone. The city was quiet. But in the heat rising from the stone, you could still hear them shouting, cheering, devouring. You wiped until the black smudges turned grey, then white, then gone. That was the only time you ever cleaned something that never bled. And somehow it felt worse. There's a crack in the platform that's growing. You noticed it last week. Thin as a thread at first, but longer now. You've tried filling it. Wood dust, wax, even cloth. Nothing holds. It spreads like a question, like something beneath the surface is shifting, breaking. You mentioned it to a man in charge. He shrugged. The city will replace it when it falls. That was all. You said nothing, but inside something flinched. You've come to rely on this scaffold. Its stillness. Its certainty. The thought of it failing, not from disrepair, but from exhaustion, haunts you. Like watching an old horse collapse mid-step. You run your fingers along the crack every morning now, just to check, just to feel it breathe. Sometimes you imagine leaving, not escaping, just stepping away, walking down a different street, letting the bucket slip from your hand and shatter on the stones, letting someone else pick up the rag, someone younger, stronger, less soaked. You picture a quiet town far from Paris, a place where the loudest sound is a rooster's call, not a crowd's roar. You picture your hands holding bread instead of a brush. You picture sleep without the blade. But these are just pictures, flashes, like sunlight caught in a crack, because even in your imagining you still turn back. Still check the scaffold, still whisper to the wood, I'm here, because this is who you are now, not by choice, but by repetition. You've started forgetting what day it is, not in the lazy way of a man on holiday, but in the deep, bone-set way of someone whose life no longer follows calendars. You know the cycle only by how thick the blood dries, how fast it clots. Monday's stains are sluggish, Fridays are frothy. You tell time by the weight of your rag, the sound of the crowd, the way the air tastes. Thinner on some mornings, thick and sour on others. Sometimes you wake thinking it's dawn, only to see the sun already high. Other times you start scrubbing before you realise no one's been executed yet. You used to mark days on a wall, tiny scratches counted by moonlight. You stopped around 100, not because you lost count, because you stopped needing to. There's a shoemaker who works across the square, middle-aged, always polishing, always mumbling to himself. Oh. He never looks at the scaffold, but you know he hears it. The thud, the cheers, the scrape of your brush. One day as you passed his stall, he dropped a note into your pocket without a word. Later in your room you unfolded it. Just a line. Do you dream in red? You didn't answer. But that night you tried to dream in green. Fields, trees, the shutters of a quiet house. You almost made it, until a single drop of blood bloomed in the grass like a flower. You woke up and laughed, Not from humour, from recognition. He was right. Even your sleep is painted. There's a new sound on the scaffold. Not the blade, not the crowd. A creak, subtle, deep. You noticed it first when kneeling by the right post. A low groan like the wood was sighing. You pressed your palm to it, felt a vibration. You don't know if it's rot or memory, but it's there, living in the beams, echoing something only you can hear. You haven't told anyone, not the guards, not the builders. If they ask, you'll say it's just the weather, just the wind. But in your heart you wonder, what happens when the scaffold gets tired of standing? What happens when the thing that has seen it all finally breaks? Someone left a scarf on the edge of the platform, red and soft, smelling faintly of perfume and oranges. You picked it up without thinking. For a moment, it reminded you of something, a girl maybe, a hallway, laughter in summer. But the thought vanished before it took shape. You folded the scarf and tucked it into your coat, not out of sentiment, out of instinct, as if your hands wanted to hold something clean. That night, the scent lingered, sweet, bright, almost painful. In the morning, you buried it under the loose plank behind your cot. You haven't touched it since. But sometimes, when you reach into your coat pocket, your fingers search for it, as if still hoping it's there. The wind has changed direction lately, comes from the river now, carries the smell of fish, rot, old wine, the kind of scent that sticks to your teeth. You breathe through it, but it settles anyway. In your hair, behind your ears, under your nails. It reminds you of markets you once passed as a child. Long tables of eels and bread and salt. But now the scent comes paired with screams, with thunderous claps of approval, with the sharp note of fresh death. You wonder if the river minds, if it notices what the city keeps feeding it. You sometimes wish you could float away on it. Just once, let it take you somewhere where the only thing to scrub is sand. You've stopped using soap. It never worked anyway. No matter how hard you scrub, the smell doesn't leave. The stains don't fade. The soap just adds a layer of dishonesty. A perfume over rot. You prefer vinegar. It's honest, sharp, real. You've come to trust its sting more than kindness. You carry a bottle with you now, tucked in your coat just in case. People see it and step aside. Maybe they think it's acid. Maybe they think you're mad. Either way, it buys space. And space in this city is as rare as forgiveness. You'd rather stink of vinegar and solitude than wear the perfume of people who never got their hands dirty. They say history remembers the big things, kings, speeches, revolutions. But you've come to believe that history lives in smaller places, in the stain behind the third bolt on the scaffold's rail, in the way the crowd hushes when a child cries, in the worn handle of your bucket, grooved by years of grip and rinse and lift. You don't make history, you erase it, one splash at a time. But somehow that feels like the more honest task. The executioner delivers death. You clean up what's left. And in that space between spectacle and silence, you found the heartbeat of the past. Not grand, not glorious, just sticky and tired and real. You remember a man who sang hymns, not before his execution, during, from the cart to the steps, voice steady as breath. He had a voice like cracked bells, worn but resonant. People stared. Some even cried. When the blade came down, his final note hung in the air like smoke. It didn't break, just stopped. You wiped slowly that day, like silence itself was something that needed cleaning. Later, you caught yourself humming one of his verses while rinsing your cloth. You stopped immediately, but it returned, again and again, in alleys, in sleep. You hum it still sometimes, without meaning to. It's not a tribute, it's a symptom, like a cough in the lungs of memory. There are cracks in your boots now that weren't there last month. You feel them when you walk, tiny pricks of cold water seeping through, reminding you that nothing stays sealed forever. You'll patch them again, with twine, with wax, with whatever scraps the city forgets behind. You've become a master of mending, not for pride, for necessity. You don't need elegance, just dryness, just silence. That's your luxury now, feet that don't squelch when you kneel, a bucket that doesn't leak, a rag that doesn't tear mid-wipe. Once you would have wanted more. Now, a day without squeaking soles feels like mercy. There's a pigeon that roosts above the scaffold, has for weeks. You've watched it through storms, through sunshine, through blood. It doesn't scare, doesn't startle. It simply watches. Its feathers are darker than most, mottled and matte, like ash pressed into down. You've taken to nodding at it when you arrive. It never nods back, but it stays, and somehow that feels like an understanding. You clean below, it watches above. Together you share the platform. You wonder sometimes if it thinks you're part of the wood now, part of the rhythm, part of the blood. Maybe you are. The guards change. Always. One day it's a man with nervous eyes and a toothpick. The next, a woman who never blinks. They rotate like stagehands in a play too long-running to matter. But you remain. You and the blade, you and the boards. Sometimes the guards ask your name. You don't answer. Sometimes they try to joke. You don't laugh. And always, by week's end, they stop speaking. You have that effect. Not because you're rude, because you remind them that the show they help manage has consequences. You're the after, and no one wants to look at what follows. There was a morning when the blade didn't fall, rope snapped, mechanism jammed. The condemned stood frozen, face already drained, mouth open mid-prayer. Everyone waited. The crowd murmured. The air thickened. Finally they called it off, postponed. You had nothing to clean, but you climbed the scaffold anyway, rinsed your cloth, ran it over the wood like memory itself had stained it. The condemned looked at you as they passed. Not with hatred, not with relief, with confusion, as if unsure whether they'd lived or not. You understood, because some days you feel the same. They came for the executioner once, not with a trial, just a name on a slip of paper handed down from someone higher. You were already there, rinsing the platform when they dragged him up the steps. He didn't resist, just looked at you once, eyes hollow, and nodded. You didn't nod back, you didn't move, you watched as they tied the ropes, adjusted the blade, tightened the bolts he used to check himself. The irony hung thick in the air, like fog, like sweat. When the blade dropped, it felt heavier than usual. You cleaned like always, but your hands shook, not from grief, from disruption. The man who stood next to you for months was gone, and the stain he left behind soaked deeper than any before it. That night, no one spoke. The scaffold groaned louder than ever. They replaced him, of course. A new executioner arrived the next day. Younger, quieter. Didn't ask questions, didn't introduce himself, just walked the stage, nodded once, and got to work. You kept your distance, let him fumble the routine. Let him find the tension in the ropes, the drag in the blade, the rhythm of fear and steel. Eventually, he looked at you and said, "You've been here longer than anyone." You didn't reply, but your silence answered well enough. Since then, he speaks less. Not because he dislikes you, because he understands. This place isn't built for talk. It's built for repetition and rust. Your hands have started to bleed again, not the deep, dangerous kind, just thin cracks. Little splits in your knuckles. They sting in vinegar, throb when cold air brushes them. You've tried gloves again, new ones, stitched by a widow near Rue Montorgueil, but they wear through in days. Blood is stronger than leather, and your work doesn't forgive weakness. So you soak your hands at night in cold water and herbs. Let them pulse, let them breathe. You never complain. Pain is part of the costume now, like the coat, like the boots, like the silence in your throat. You once saw a woman try to bribe her way out, right there on the platform. A ruby ring slid from her finger into the palm of a young guard. He hesitated, just a blink. But the crowd saw. And once the crowd sees, there's no undoing. The ring clattered to the floor as they pulled her forward. You picked it up when no one was looking, not to keep, to hide. You dropped it into the bucket with a quiet splash, let it sink among rags and water and pulp. You didn't want to see it again and didn't want it to glint beneath the blood. That night you dreamed of her voice, not begging, singing, a song you'd never heard but somehow knew. The city forgets quickly. Buildings fall. Names change. Faces fade. But the scaffold remains. You've seen painters come and go. Bakers. Policemen. Lovers. And yet every time you return to your spot, bucket, rag, blade, the world feels the same. You wonder if Paris will ever run out of blood. If one day the platform will groan and collapse under the weight of it all. You wonder if the city will weep, or if it will simply build a new one. Clean wood, fresh blade, new stain, maybe the new cleaner. One with softer hands and brighter dreams. You almost pity him. There was a girl once who kissed the plank, right before kneeling. Not a long kiss. Just a touch, as if blessing the wood, as if forgiving it. You remember your breath catching, not because of the kiss, because no one had ever done it before. You hesitated to wipe that spot afterward. Let it sit longer, let the vinegar soak around it, not through it. When you finally scrubbed, you did it slow, gentle, like you're raising a prayer. The crowd had already dispersed, but you remained, kneeling, rubbing, listening to the wind move across the square like a sigh, and in that silence you whispered the only word that felt right. Sorry. The rain hasn't stopped in 3 days. It drips from the awnings, pools in the cobbles, turns the scaffold stairs slick as ice. Your boots squelch with each step, the damp creeping up through your soles into your bones. The vinegar doesn't help. It mixes with the smell of mildew, of old blood made new again by the wet. Everything smells like iron and rot and wet wool. The crowd comes anyway, holding umbrellas, cloaks drawn tight, as if the act of watching death somehow justifies standing in a storm. You scrub slower today. The water works against you, lifting the stains just enough to move them, never enough to erase them. You chase puddles, not streaks, and when you look down at your hands, you can't tell where your skin ends and the rain begins. You've taken to wrapping your wrists with cloth, not for warmth, for memory. The fabric came from an old coat you wore your first year here, brown with frayed cuffs and a tear across the chest from a drunken stumble. The coat is gone now, but the strips remain. You tie them tight before you work, like armour, like prayer. Some days the cloth stays dry, most days it doesn't. But the ritual grounds you, reminds you that once you had something whole, something clean. The others don't ask about it. If they notice, they say nothing, and you prefer it that way. You'd rather your softness remain unseen. There are mornings when the blade jams, not from rust, no, you keep it clean, but from tension, from weather, from fate. When it catches mid-fall, the noise is wrong, sharp, jarring, like a scream cut off too early. The crowd gasps, the executioner swears, and you move quickly, almost too quickly, to clear whatever's caused it. Sometimes it's a rope, sometimes a warp in the wood. Once it was a shard of bone. You don't flinch anymore. You remove the obstruction. You clean what you must. And when the blade drops again, smooth this time, you resume as if nothing happened. Because in your world, interruptions are just stains in a different shape. You've begun talking to the stains, not in words, in thought. You assign them stories. That streak near the edge? A soldier who never fired his musket. That pool beneath the left rail? A woman who lied for love. The splatter that arcs like a fan across the backboard. A thief who gave most of what he stole to children. You don't know if any of it's true, it doesn't matter. The stories soften them, make them manageable. You never speak aloud, but in your mind you narrate. You tell the blood what it was, what it meant, what it left behind. Maybe it helps them move on, or maybe it helps you stay. Once, you followed the cart after the execution, just to see where it went. Not far, just down the road past the bakery, to a narrow alley where the driver unloaded the remains like scraps. You watched from a distance as a man with tongs sorted through limbs, tossing them into burlap sacks. He whistled as he worked. Something tuneless and sharp you never followed again. But you remember the sound, the way it echoed off the alley walls like laughter turned inside out. Since that day, you've never looked at the cart again. You let it roll away behind you unseen. You've cleaned what was left. You don't need to see where it ends. The executioner once asked if you ever wanted to switch jobs, just for a day. You clean enough blood, he said. Might as well make some. He laughed. You didn't. You looked at him, long and quiet, until he stopped smiling. You didn't answer, didn't need to. Some lines don't get crossed, even here. You're not the one who ends, you're the one who follows. And though the world might confuse your silence for complicity, you know the difference. One hand holds the blade, the other cleans the wound. Neither is clean, but only one knows how to kneel. Your hands no longer look like yours. They've thickened, darkened, cracked at the folds. Your knuckles are permanently swollen, your palms mapped with scars too shallow to matter, but too deep to forget. The smell never leaves, even after scrubbing with lye, even after salt, even after fire. It clings beneath your fingernails, inside the webbing of your fingers, along the beds of each callus. You tried soaking them once in rosewater. It turned the scent into something sweeter, but worse, like a corpse in bloom. Now, you just let it stay. Your hands are not for greeting, not for holding, they're for rinsing, wringing, scrubbing. They're instruments of quiet erasure, and they know it. There's a woman who sells apples at the edge of the square, old, hunched, with a scarf always tied tight beneath her chin. She never speaks to you, but once you saw her place an apple on the edge of your path, just one, red to clean. You didn't take it. You stepped around it, kept walking. That night you dreamed of orchards, rows and rows of trees heavy with fruit, the branches creaking not from wind but from memory. You woke with the taste of apple skin in your mouth. Tart, cold. You haven't seen her since, but sometimes when the air shifts, you swear you smell cider beneath the vinegar, and it makes you ache. There are pieces of the scaffold that have splinters shaped like teeth. You discovered one when your palm caught it, clean, sharp, unforgiving. It bled for hours. You bandaged it, of course, but later you returned and ran your hand over the spot. Not to test it again, just to feel it, like a tooth waiting to bite. You didn't smooth it, didn't file it down, you left it. Some things aren't meant to be softened. Not here, not anymore, and so it waits, like everything else, silent, sharp, patient. A reminder that even the wood in time grows fangs. You've stopped wearing colour. Your clothes were never bright, but now they've faded into a palette of ash, rust and rain. Not from choice, from function. Colour draws the eye, and you'd rather not be seen. Let the crowd forget you're there. Let them think the stains vanish on their own. You tried once to wear a green scarf, found it in a market stall, soft as moss. You wore it beneath your coat. No one saw it, but you knew, and somehow that made it worse. By midday it had absorbed blood. By night it had turned black. You left it folded on the windowsill and watched it blow away in the wind. You didn't go after it. There's a rhythm to execution days now. Not just the steps, the tools, the wipes. The air changes. You feel it before you see the cart. A pressure, a weight behind the wind, a tightening in your ribs. Even when no date is posted, even when the guards say nothing, you feel it. Like the blade whispers ahead of itself. Like the blood arrives early, waiting. You've come to trust that feeling, more than you trust the notices. More than the men in coats, you feel the death before the name. And you prepare. Cloth, bucket, silence. It's not magic, it's muscle memory. A sixth sense built from too many endings. There was a man who thanked you. Just before he knelt, a soft voice barely audible. Thank you, he said. Not for saving him, for witnessing, for cleaning, for staying after everyone else looked away. You didn't answer, but your hands trembled as you wiped the board he touched. Not because of his words, because you realised how rare they were. No one thanks the cleaner. No one sees the second act. Only the fall, only the splash, only the gasp. But he saw you. Just once. And now, when you kneel in that corner, you move slower, gentler, like something sacred was left behind in the whisper. There's a smell the platform makes after a long day. It's not the blood, not entirely. It's the mixture of iron and sweat and old wood baked beneath a dull sun. You've come to recognise it as the scent of memory. It rises from the boards like breath from a sleeping beast. You smell it before you reach the steps, before the crowd begins to murmur, before the blade sings. That smell tells you everything you need to know. How many fell, how hard they struggled, how long the platform sat before you arrived. Some days it greets you like an old friend, others it recoils like you've taken too long. Either way, you return the gesture. A bowed head, a cloth dipped, a slow steady scrub. There was a painter once, young, nervous, sharp-eyed, who came to sketch the scaffold. Not the execution, the aftermath. He asked if he could watch you work. You shrugged, said nothing. He sat quietly, charcoals in hand, capturing the curve of your back, the twist of your wrist. Days passed, then a week, then two. One morning he didn't come, but tucked beneath your bucket was a rolled canvas. You opened it that night. The painting wasn't of the scaffold, it was of your hands. Worn, wet, cupping a rag like it was a newborn bird. You stared at it for hours. Then you burned it. Not from shame, from truth. You'd rather be forgotten than remembered like that. Half man, half myth, all stain. You sometimes wonder what the platform would say if it could speak. Not to confess, no, the scaffold isn't guilty, but to reflect. To describe the weight of every footstep, the warmth of blood, the chill of shoes dragged across it. Maybe it would be bitter, maybe proud, maybe it wouldn't speak at all, just creak, just crack, just sigh. You don't speak to it anymore, not like you used to, but you do listen, to the way the boards shift beneath you, to the hum in the nails, to the silence between drops. There's language in silence, if you stay still long enough. You've grown fluent in it. One day a child was brought, not to die, to watch. His father held his hand the entire time, explaining things in a low, serious voice. "This is justice," the man said. The boy didn't blink, didn't cry, just stared. After the blade fell, the boy looked at you, right into you, and said, "Do you ever get tired?" You didn't answer, not because you didn't want to, because you didn't know how. You still don't. You think of him sometimes, especially on the quiet days, wondering if he remembers your face, if he scrubs something now, wherever he is, if the stain followed him home. There's a crack in your wall at home, small but growing. You trace it with your finger every night before sleep. It reminds you of the platform, the way time wears down even what we think is solid. You've stuffed cloth into it, wax. Once, a page from a book. Nothing holds, the crack grows anyway. You've come to accept it. Let it split, let it breathe. In a city where everything's crumbling, at least the wall is honest. You've begun to speak to it, quietly, just before sleep. "Still here?" you whisper. And in its own way, it whispers back. You cleaned a wedding ring once, not intentionally. It slipped free from a man's finger and landed in a pool of blood. You picked it up with the rag, turned it over in your palm. Gold, thin, dented. You thought about pocketing it, thought about returning it. Instead, you dropped it into the crack beneath the scaffold, let the wood keep it, let the blade forget it. But you remember, not the man, the ring, the way it felt warm in your hand, like it still remembered the promise it was forged to keep. You wonder how many vows the scaffold has swallowed, how many secrets its grain remembers, and how many will die with it. You once saw a man try to sing his way out of dying, not as a plea, more like a shield. He sang loud, firm, arms tied, voice trembling on the high notes. It was a love song, something old and off-key, but his throat didn't waver. Even as the blade was raised, even as the crowd hushed, he kept going. You remember thinking, maybe if he finishes, maybe it won't happen, and it did, mid-verse, mid-note. The silence afterward was sharper than the blade. You wiped up the blood, but the song stayed, in your ear, in your breath. For days after, every clink of the bucket, every squeak of the scaffold sounded like the next note. You've come to hate music, not because of the man, because you remember he didn't get to finish. There's a piece of rope you keep in your coat pocket, frayed, stiff, cut unevenly. You didn't mean to take it. It snagged on your boot during a rushed clean-up and stayed there all day. When you noticed it that night, you thought about tossing it. But you didn't. Something about the way it curled, half noose, half thread, felt too familiar. Now you carry it with you, not as a token, not as a charm, as a reminder. That every part of this machine has teeth. That even the things that hold people still can't let go. Nights, your fingers find it without thinking. They trace the knot. And you wonder how many wrists it held before it found you. One of the younger guards asked you how many you've cleaned. You didn't answer. He laughed, said he was just curious. You kept scrubbing. A few minutes later, he asked again. You looked at him that time, really looked, and said, "Enough." That was it. He didn't ask again, but he started watching you more closely, the way your hands moved, the way your eyes never met the condemned. You can tell he's trying to learn, trying to understand how someone can do this work and still breathe after. You want to tell him there's no trick, just time, and time is a slow poison you sip willingly day after day. You had a dog once, years ago, before the scaffold, before the vinegar, just a mutt with bad teeth and a tail that wagged sideways. You remember how she used to follow you everywhere, even into the stream when you fetched water. One winter she vanished. No yelp, no body, no sign, just gone. You looked for days, asked neighbours, whistled in alleys, nothing. You still think of her when the wind carries a certain kind of bark, sharp, distant, hopeful. You never got another dog. You don't keep things you'd have to bury, not anymore. You sometimes imagine a scaffold with no stains, not because no one dies, but because someone else comes behind you, cleaner than you, better. You picture him in white gloves, with tools finer than yours, moving like a dancer, leaving nothing behind. The wood gleams, the crowd stares in awe. No smell, no flies, just death and polish. But then you wake up and you see your hands, and you know, no matter how gentle, how practiced, how fast, you've never made anything clean, only cleaner. That's your legacy, less red, not none, just less. The crows have started gathering again. They perch on the rooftops near the square, fat and glossy, eyes too clever. You hear them in the mornings before the carts arrive. They caw like they're laughing, or warning. You've never feared them. You nod when you pass. Sometimes they nod back. There's one, scarred beak, lopsided wing, you've named Monarch. You don't feed him, but he follows, watches you wipe, then flies off before the next drop. In a city where everyone looks away, Monarch watches everything. You wonder if he tells the others, if the sky carries stories of you, or if crows forget too. You once spilled the bucket, mid-clean, mid-day, mid-sentence of a man in the crowd yelling something you didn't catch. The wood had warped from heat. Your boot caught on the edge and down it went. Vinegar, blood, rag, everything. It splashed across your coat, your boots, the steps. The crowd gasped louder than they had for the execution. You froze, not from fear, from shame, from the sheer exposure of it. All eyes turned to you, and in that moment you weren't the cleaner. You were the stain, the mistake, the interruption. A guard stepped toward you, but you waved him off. Picked up the bucket, refilled it, scrubbed harder, faster. Like you could erase the moment itself. You couldn't, of course, but by the time you finished, no one remembered, only you. There was a poet brought up last week. Young, too thin, hands ink-stained even at the end. He had no final words, no last request. But when the blade fell, a folded scrap of paper fluttered from his sleeve, landed at your feet. You didn't open it right away. You waited, tucked it beneath your coat. That night you unfolded it by candlelight. 5 lines, half of them smudged, but the last one read, "Even the blade forgets what it cuts." You stared at that for a long time, reread it until the ink blurred into nothing. Then you burned it with the corner of your sleeve. You wanted to forget it. You didn't. There are days the stains lift too easily. You wipe once and the blood comes away in a single sheet, like it never wanted to stay. Those days unsettle you more than any other. They feel off, wrong, like the wood is trying to hide something, like the death itself was unpredatored. You scrub harder on those days, not to clean, but to remember. You don't trust silence that comes too fast. You don't trust stains that let go too soon. Something about grief should linger. Something about the end should resist. When it doesn't, you feel cheated. Not for yourself, for them. Your sleep has shifted. Shorter now. Lighter. You wake before dawn without meaning to, your eyes opening to shadows shaped like planks, your breath already tight like vinegars in the air. You lie still for a while, listen to the street. Gauge the day by footfall and horse cart. You rise when it feels right. Not by clock, by instinct, and by the time the first light kisses the scaffold, you're already kneeling, already wiping, already whispering to the stains that today, maybe, you'll leave one patch of wood cleaner than you found it. You never do, but the whisper helps. There was a priest once who offered you a blessing, right there on the platform before the crowd. You said no, not angrily, just quiet, firm. He looked surprised. Said something about carrying a heavy burden. You didn't answer. What would be the point? Blessings don't clean rags, they don't dull the vinegar. They don't stop the crowd from cheering when a body goes limp. Later that night, though, you knelt in your room and whispered something close to prayer, not for salvation, for stillness, for just one night of quiet dreams. The next morning, the blade stuck halfway down. You've started hearing footsteps where there are none, soft ones, like bare feet on wet boards. They follow you down the stairs, linger at the corners of your vision. You don't look for them anymore. You just let them walk beside you. Maybe they're memories. Maybe they're nothing, but they've never hurt you, never shouted, never wept. They're just there, like the scaffold's breath, like the hum beneath the planks. You don't fear them, you've grown used to the company. In fact, on the days they're absent, you feel more alone. There's a part of the scaffold you never clean anymore. Back left corner, beneath the rail. Not because it's too stained, because it isn't. Because that patch of wood, after everything, remains strangely untouched. A light grey square amid all the red. You once scrubbed it harder than any other, just to test it. Still, it held nothing. No mark, no smear. You came to think of it as sacred. Not blessed, Not wholly, just spared. You touch it sometimes when no one's watching, just your fingertips tracing the grain. It feels softer than the rest. Warmer almost, like the wood remembers mercy, and wants you to too. One night, long after the crowd had gone and the moon hung like a cracked coin in the sky, you stayed behind. Not to clean, just to sit. You rested against the support beam, legs stretched out, palms open on the cool boards. The scaffold creaked beside you, not from weight but from memory. You could feel the ghost, not in the air, not in the dark, but in your chest. Light, familiar, not angry, just present. You didn't cry, you didn't pray, you just whispered it, "I'm still here." And the wood groaned back, not as an answer, but as an acknowledgement. Your coat is almost threadbare now, holes at the cuffs, a tear under the collar. The inside pockets sag with age and use. You patch it where you can, but you know it won't last much longer. Part of you dreads the day it falls apart. Not because of the cold, but because it knows your shape, the smell, the stains, the routine. A new coat would feel like a lie, like pretending the blood never touched you. So you wear this one until it gives out, until the cloth no longer clings, until even it forgets what it carried. There's a silence at the end of each day that's different from all the rest. Not the hush of a crowd dispersing, not the quiet of the city settling into dusk. This silence is deeper, heavier. It presses into your shoulders as you walk home. It clings to your tongue when someone passes you in the street. It fills the corners of your room when the candle burns low. You've learned not to fight it. You sit with it. Let it breathe. Let it speak. And in its company, you remember why you started, why you stayed, why you still return, not because you were chosen, but because someone had to stay behind and bear witness. Someone had to clean. They will forget you. That much is certain. No monument, no plaque, no record in any book. The scaffold will be dismantled, or replaced, or left to rot. And the city will move on. New blood, new names, new noises. But you will have been here, with your bucket, your brush, your silence. You will have seen what others looked away from. And in that small, strange service you will have mattered. Not to history, but to those whose final breath was not lost in dirt, but wiped gently from wood. And when the time comes, when the city no longer calls you, when your legs no longer carry, when your hands forget how to ring, maybe you'll find that corner again. The one without stains. You'll sit beside it, fingers resting on the quiet grain. And you'll whisper one last time, "I'm still here." And if the scaffold remembers, if the wood still listens, it might whisper back, "So am I."